Folks, how's the dinner? How about a hand for Little America and all the great service they've been giving to us tonight? Thank you. Folks, it's now my pleasure to bring up to the stage Wyoming's Poet Laureate, Barbara Smith. She's the state's 9th Poet Laureate. She was appointed by Governor Gordon in 2023, and she's going to share a few poems with us. Last year, this was my favorite part of the event. So Barbara, can you come to the stage?
Hello, good evening, and thank you for letting me come here and read some poems to you. This is my second year of being Poet Laureate, and I'm starting to get the hang of it, I think. The first poem I want to read is kind of dedicated to all of those people up in the northern part of the state this year who suffered from all the fires and the smoke and all the damage that was done there. And this is a poem of mine that took a while to build. It's in 3 parts, and it's kind of 3 different stories about experiences with fire and the unknown that happens with it. It's called Smoke Signal. Squinting against the setting sun, we see a single wisp rising straight out of the dark pines. Is that smoke or a mirage reflecting off still water? Rounding the curve and down the hill, fire trucks roar past, lights flashing. Yes, smoke fills the valley, burns our eyes that fast. We can't see across the lake from where we have been. Fire has found the mountain. A bullhorn blares from a truck. You're safe, don't worry. Smoke tells another story. I walk through the house, filled with the years we spent there. If we must flee, what would I take? What would I leave for the fire? Last summer, on another mountain, 2 old lovers sat on their porch watching a plume of smoke drifting across the dry California valley. Assured by firemen it was too far away to harm them, but by nightfall they would flee, fire leaping across their path on the red-hot winds. Their cats hiding who knows where in the peach orchard. Later, they breached the barricades before it was safe, not to fight the fire, not to stop the barn from burning or the grove from scorching, but to search for cats. Eyes glittering through the haze, surviving. My grandmother was a girl when the fire came, burning her house and her father. He saved them all, but the flames snared him on his way out the door. They rolled him in cotton batting, and he died swabbed in a white cloud she would never forget. She looks down at me from the portrait hanging on my wall. Old eyes in a young face. I would rescue those eyes from the flame on my way out the door. All right. Last year I read some poems about the fortunate experience of living in the high red desert. And this year I want to read a couple of poems about the impressions or the misconceptions that sometimes people have about our land, about Wyoming, about our place. When I was first putting my book together, I wanted to call it Flyover Country. You know, flyover country. And my editor, of a very gentle man who never told me no, he just did it his own way, said, that's an interesting idea. And then he came back and said there were about 14 books called Flyover Country. So, but this is the poem. On the flight between LA and Chicago, a pilot might point out some feature below, like the Grand Canyon or Devil's Tower. But he won't mention our place on the west-eastern slope of the Rockies. They call it flyover country. High deserts where rains rarely fall. Some might say, what's to look at anyway? But just miles and miles of sagebrush, prairie, small towns nestled in the Badlands. But this plain follows the Oregon Trail, like the scar across the land, still visible from the air, as thousands of hopefuls walk the west, following wagons or pushing handcarts in search of something else, California or the fertile valleys of Oregon. Some stopped along the way, claimed this place as their own. I once walked the Continental Divide on a short trek, watched contrails of planes crisscrossing the sky, saw a sago lily blooming alone on the trail. The only sound, the wind whistling tales of long ago, a creaking of immigrant wagons on South Pass, echoing in ruts cut shoulder deep. Some people come here and it scares the crap out of them. This is called facing the elements. At the gas station, one stormy day, a woman pulls up, cracks her window, screams, "How can you people live here? Hundreds of miles of nothing. You could die out there." She rolls her window up tight. Used to the comfort of trees hugging the road, the buffeting wind unsettles her. This wide sky shows how small we really are. At home, as the snow falls and the wind whistles in tune with the kettle, I hear her frightened voice. You could die out there. When you live in the West, pay attention. Listen. Earth, air, fire, and water are your constant companions. But so are sunrises, mockingbird mornings, when the curtains swell with sweet spring. Without the storms, the sago lilies would not bloom on the red desert, sprung unbidden in a place of their own choosing. And the antelope would not run free, cutting before you on the road to the lake. The hot winds of summer remind you, savor this. It will change. You could die out there. Well, I must say that I've been to this, oh, thank you. I must say that I've been to this Governor's Arts Award banquet a few times, and every darn time there's a blizzard. And I live in Rock Springs, Wyoming, which happens to be on the other side of Elk Mountain. And over the years, a lot of people have a lot of stories about the roads, because this is the one thing we all have in common, is that we have these roads and we have to get somewhere. And one of the pieces out of this poem, Interstate 80, I-80 poem, comes from geologist David Love, who told me a story one time about how the highway engineers decided where to put I-80 over by Elk Mountain. And anyway, it was a amusing story I tucked away, and some years later, this poem came out. So you have to be careful with poets, because they'll sell you out, you know. Anyway, I thought I'd read I-80, and then, by George, the weather was beautiful today. No blizzard, no going around on Old 30, no hustling up against the back end of some kind of a truck. Nothing like that. No looking from one reflector to the other with the window open and your head hanging out the window. Those kinds of things. You all know that story. Okay, so this poem is meant down the road, but it's called Interstate 80. For 20 minutes after they finally finished the last stretch around this. Moving in the heat, but more rest stop for 125 miles. Rest stop for 125 miles. Perhaps he saw the look after crossing the knife-like cut into the wide, flat valley, promising sparkling blue in the west, and declared, "This is the place," before she could say anything. How was he to know that lake was salt, not sweet? Later, they got down and prayed, like a lot of folks on I-80, coming through that pass, across a radiator-boiling desert, or around Elk Mountain, the interstate 20 miles too close, because a highway engineer fell in love with a pretty drive in the summer, through bowls of wind-etched rock where nothing lands long enough to grow. The mountain mesmerized him, made him forget what he shouldn't. A motorcyclist crossing the Bonneville salt flats with his sandblasted wife in the sidecar cranks up the Christian radio network and prays she doesn't notice highway signs, dust hazard, Devil's Gate, no services. Thank you.
Folks, is Director Westby with Whiteout in the room? If he is, you do not want to hire her as a public information officer. Folks, I want to tell you part 2 of the moving story, and it's very quick. We left Casper to Cheyenne with 6 horses in the trailer. I know we did, Julie. I know we had 6 horses. The day we got there, the day after, a little Morgan filly showed up with a bill of sale with your name on it. How did we leave Casper with 6 horses and end up in Cheyenne with 7 horses? Can you help me with that? Folks, when I graduated college, I had an amazing mentor that was a professor and became a good friend and is still a very good friend of mine. And I left before graduation because I didn't want to stay for graduation because I had a job up in Alaska. And I remember the mail plane landing in July, and he wrote me a letter. And it was a very powerful letter. And I remember the 4 things, kind of the 4 tenets that he had in this letter. It was talking about listening, working as hard as you can to improve your community, doing the right thing, and being the hardest worker in the room, the hardest worker on the boat, the hardest worker on your crew, whatever it is. Those 4 things. Folks, we're fortunate to have a governor who not only supports the arts and recognizes the value and impact of the arts have on our Wyoming communities, he's also the epitome of listening, tirelessly working to make Wyoming a better place. And he does the right thing, and sometimes that's not easy. And he's always the hardest worker in the room. Ladies and gentlemen, Governor Mark Gordon.
Kind of fairly quickly, so I thought I wouldn't tell any jokes. But I will tell you, I've been watching the government. Compliments to Will Rogers. So it is so nice to see you all here tonight. And Dave, thank you. Wonderful evening. Folks, if you're visiting, we don't usually throw dead animals at people. Sarah, you have done a phenomenal job again, and the whole crew of Cultural Resources. Thanks. You know, there's a dear friend of mine that I worked with for a long time at something called the U-Cross Foundation, which has a has an artist in residence program, and Sharon Dynack, wherever you are, there you are. Sharon and I have shared. She ran the foundation. I ran the ranch, and I think 5'9" prairie dog kind of roaming around. 5'9" prairie dog kind of. But I think Cross is a place that you have to make a decision. You have to come together. And one of the great things about that was that, just like we are this evening, and to talk about what's going on. Now, I have to tell you, when my ranch hands would go out there and they'd see somebody dressed as a prairie dog with a little village, they didn't really get anything out of that. Came together and they made a little bit of sense, a little more sense, let me put it that way. And so, Barbara, your poetry this evening kind of brought back the fact that this is a beautiful place where we live. And it inspires so many things. They are, and the lights are really bright. So Anita Roman and James Sorrells, if you would please stand up. Anita is the Arapaho liaison, and James Sorrells is Shoshone. And if you've been anywhere in Wyoming and thought about that, you've seen the art and why it inspires so much. You know, the quality of our life is so enriched, and the communities are so much more vibrant with the work that's done, from music to portraits to pictures to photography. Anything you want to talk about that's artistic, it is truly more vibrant and more vital here. Plank used to talk about how nice it was, and you know, we all know the Tetons and they're beautiful and everything else. But when you think about what this landscape is, the place that you say in my, but everybody I've over or Sheridan, Wyoming. It's all that same thing. Something our legislature that makes. It's about celebrating our state and what it does to people and what people remember about it and what people depict about it. Wyoming is proud to be home to the many, many wonderful artists, and we thank you for all the work you do. We also thank those who care enough to make sure that they put it in places that we can all and see. Unlike your friend who locks it up in the house. Really, when I look at this room tonight, I see people who care about the future, who care about Wyoming, and who care about making sure. And that's because we have good friends like the one we're going to, who no matter how good it was that you were, he would always say things like, Mark, you're going to need a little bit more spirit. So Dave, if that's appropriate, here we go. Thank you for coming this evening. God bless you.
Be proud of who you are. Be proud of your background. Be proud of your traditions. Be proud of your family. And the main thing is be proud.
That culture and those ways he viewed given by the Creator, and he wanted to share that gift with other people so that they could enjoy and appreciate him too. And that's why it was represented and how it represented that and why he wore it.
I want everybody to respect everything that you do, because you speak with your hands and give it to the people.
You know, I see a generation of young people who were taught by their elder, Willie LeClair, are continuing to perpetuate the art and culture that he celebrated.
I don't care whether you're red, black, white, or yellow, whether you're enrolled, not enrolled. I want to preserve our culture because that's who we are as Indian people.
So I'm really pleased to ask, excuse me, Director Glenn and Arts Council Board Chair Adam Harris to invite Willie's son, Mark LeClair, to the stage. So, and be good to me.
Zansikami ni Mark Harris ni Nua Apa Biawangovi. Good evening. My name's Mark Harris. Tall Pine, or Willie LeClair, was my Shoshone father. I opened in the language of the Shoshone people, and James, I hope I didn't butcher it too badly, and with hand talk to honor the things that were so important to Dad. The language, both spoken and signed, and the art and culture of the Eastern Shoshone people. I'd like to thank Mom and my family for allowing me to speak this evening. This is a somewhat daunting task because I feel it is important to share with you what Dad would want to say, not all the things we would love to say about him. Perhaps the first thing Dad would want to say is thank you to everyone who made this possible. There are so many of you that we need to thank for this honor, and I apologize now for those of you that I miss. First, I want to thank all of you who put so much effort into helping prepare and submit the application. Shannon Smith and Sean Reese at the Wyoming Humanities, Andrew Schneider, formerly with the Wyoming Arts Alliance, the Chief Washakie Foundation for their support of the nomination, of course, the Wyoming Arts Alliance, and the Wyoming Arts Council for nominating Dad, and a man that Dad had so much respect for, Biagwichandaivo Degwahi. I won't tell. Governor Mark Gordon, for actually selecting Dad. Governor, having been eyewitness to how much fun Dad had visiting with you and sometimes maybe even teasing you a little bit, I'm sure at this point he would have a humorous story from the one shot to share with everyone, and I also know you would bear the brunt of that humor.
Your blessing.
Dad would share with you how honored he is and humbled by this award. Who would have ever guessed a New Odivo boy from the North Fork of the Wind River would be honored in this way? He would continue to tell you that he is not as what is important in this story. Many times as we traverse the reservation, he would say, "Son, this isn't about me or you. It's about the future. It's about preserving and sharing our language, culture, and traditions for all of those coming after us." Coming from an oral tradition, it was not easy for Dad to jump into recording all of this. Some years ago, I approached him about taking some of the songs that we use for ceremonies from cassettes to CDs. He had to think about it for a few years before he decided that big leap in technology would be okay. But he did understand and recognize that the best way to preserve and share the knowledge he carried with both the present and the future was to record it. Perhaps he would also at this point want to thank Shannon and Sean again and the Wyoming Humanities for all they did to make those PBS recordings of his hand-talked videos possible, and Matt Wright at PBS for the amazing videography he did on those. And I really encourage you all to go to YouTube and look at them. They're amazing. Not only did Shannon help Dad make those videos, but she also connected Dad with a project at the University of Wyoming headed by Dr. Melanie McKay Cody that is recording, catalog, and preserving the North American Indian Sign Language. Dad met regularly on video with Dr. McKay Cody and representatives of 8 or 9 tribes from as far north as Canada and clear south into New Mexico. He was really excited, and I think you saw that in the video, about what this project was making possible as far as preserving that hand talk. Whether it was his regalia that he used in the presentations, traditional songs and dances, stories, or the hand talk he loved so much, it was critical to him that it be preserved and shared. And another important aspect of his presentations, that his culture be shared with everyone, all people, so that they might gain a greater understanding and appreciation for that culture. My brother Sonny and I, and Sonny's in here, we're talking about a trip the family took to Scotland to share the culture of the Shoshone people. He reminded me of Dad's words to the people there. Even though we are many people with different cultures and different traditions, we are all one race, the human race. Finally, I think he would probably want to thank Dhamma Appa, our Heavenly Father, for all the blessings he has received. And he would tell you that the greatest of those blessings was his wonderful wife of 54 years, my mom, Connie. She supported him in all of his endeavors, from the sweat lodge to his travels across the globe. On behalf of Mom and our whole family, I'd like to thank you for honoring Dad.
Oh, you have a picture, right?
14 years in politics. What is that?
All right. And now, am I supposed to keep going? Go ahead, sir. Or am I supposed to let you do it? Okay, all right. So now, You know, if you've ever been to the Capitol, there's a phenomenal painting. And down in the corner of that painting, you can find former Governor Ed Hirschler, who had 3 terms, just saying. But it is truly an honor to show the next video from a phenomenal artist.
Can be gauged on how the art was done. Art is the highest form of any culture. The whole history of the world can be gauged on how the art was done. It gives a measure of the civilization.
What I like about his work is it tells a story. You can just look at his work and it captures life.
When I got to high school, I had a phenomenal high school art teacher, Bill McCran. And then when I was 17, I went to Europe with my grandmother and my brother, getting to see the masters like Rembrandt and Michelangelo. And that really got me fired up in the art.
He gives back to the community. You know, he has donated some of his prints, like to the military museum up in Du Bois. Very giving individual.
In 1981, I found out that I'd won a competition for the Wyoming State Capitol mural. It's on the north wall, and it'd be like looking across Wyoming. To the very upper left, you'd have Yellowstone, the Tetons, and to the far right, you'd have Devil's Tower.
You know, you see the railroad there, you see the sheep, you see the cows. I think it's important for us to know the history. It's pretty much the history of Wyoming.
Down in that left corner, I did a little hidden picture of Ed Hirschler, and I hid my face in there too, so.
He painted an original painting of the submarine, USS Wyoming. And in the clouds, you see the buffalo. And that original painting sits in the captain's cabin in the submarine that's based out of Kings Bay, Georgia.
Friend Dick Nelson at the Powell First National Bank commissioned me to do several works. I did a 16-foot steel relief mural in the Powell Bank and a life-size figure of a farmer. I think it enriches life because it's not just a blank space they go into. They have something that's been decorated and they can enjoy it.
I believed he was deserving of getting recognized as one of the great artists in the state of Wyoming. He's quite renowned.
Never wanted to leave this place. I was born here, and it has so many fascinating areas in its geography, its geology. I just love it, so I feel inspired by the state.
Mike, would you join us up here?
Well, thank you for allowing me to be here. This is such an honor for me, the highest honor of my life. And I really want to thank especially Ann Redmond, who's nominated me for year after year for this award. I want to thank my family, my brother Ron and his wife Patty, their 2 daughters, Kim and Kristen, their husbands, Matt and Jason, and their lovely kids, Madison, Hadley, Alexander, and Nicholas, sorry. Anyway, and all of you, my whole art started with my dad. He taught me how to do oil paintings at 11. By the time he went to work and came home at noon, I'd already done my first oil painting. Later on in high school, I had Bill McCran, who's a fantastic teacher, and I had other art teachers in high school who were around the state who were very important, like Tim Collins in Laramie, Al Keeney in Rock Springs, Jim Gilpin in Riverton. That was during my life. And they were very helpful in inspiring young artists to become professional artists or art teachers. Later on at the university, I was really inspired by works by Dick Evans, I studied under Victor Flack and Bob Russin. I wanted to learn how to stone carve, so that was one of the big things at the University of Wyoming I did. Later on, I got into welding, and from that, I've since done several things for the state. One for the Oil and Gas Commission in Casper, one for the Law Enforcement Academy there in Douglas, and I've got one there in the First National Bank of Powell and several other places around the state. So I've done a lot of welded work too. The one thing that got me in college was the outing club. I got into climbing and got into caving, and that really got me to see the inside and the outside of Wyoming and appreciate it. I've been on top of the Grand Teton 5 times, 3 on top of the Devil's Tower. I've done numerous climbs in the Wind Rivers, the Beartooths, the Absarokas. All of these things have been really inspiring to me. It's the adventure that really has inspired my work. One of my friends is here, Tom Brinkerhoff. He and I and my first wife, Susie, back in 1977, my brother took us up on the DuBois side of the Wind Rivers, and we skied across on a New Year's Day. We climbed Gannett Peak. Undergoing about 20, 30 below zero temperatures, we spent 4 nights in snow caves and got out of there, and we were the first ones to ever climb it on New Year's Day. So it was really, this has all been inspiring to me that I like to put into my paintings. So that's been one of the major inspirations, is the outdoors adventures. But on top of which, I just love Wyoming, and I want to thank you for all being here, and I really appreciate that the Arts Council would have myself one of the recipients for this fine award. Thank you very much.
Come on over. I didn't realize you were a climber. All right.
Okay, congratulations. Thanks. Awesome. Thank you.
If you've ever had a chance to visit the Wildlife Museum, you'll know what an extraordinary collection. And I remember the sort of first year that it was built. It was a very wet spring, and it was very warm. And I remember watching stuff run off that hill and wondering if that would even last. But our next recipient has made an impression which is indelible on Wyoming. So let's run the next video, please.
The artists in this collection, they are exceptional. And when you look at it, you're seeing more than you would see if you just take a snapshot yourself. You're seeing more than you would see if you're just looking out your car window or out your back door. And I always say artists are a bit like poets. They take their subjects and then they focus on what is the essence, and they distill it, so they come up with something profound and something that speaks to people, and it's really inspiring. I was a school art teacher in New York State, and I was spending my summers, though, in Wyoming with the National Outdoor Leadership School. I loved it. It was a great introduction to Wyoming, but it was also a great introduction to Wyoming wildlife.
Jane has really, in my eyes, perfected the art of educating, being the role of a teacher and helping people understand what the museum is about.
People in today's busy world, they don't have a whole lot of opportunity to slow down and to reflect and to think about things that are bigger than themselves. And I think art museums are perfect places to do that. It used to be that museums were mostly just storehouses for artwork to keep them safe. And nowadays, that has changed a lot. Museums are places where people can come and they can be safe and they can be inspired and they can be encouraged to be creative.
One of her programs that she has helped implement and create is our Make It Wild art education classes where adults and children of all ages, if they want to participate, they come either in person or online and take these classes from local artists who will teach the beginners and intermediate into cultivating their artistic abilities.
Right now we're in our Wapiti Gallery and we have an exhibit of students from Jackson Hole High School, and this is what we call our student curated exhibit. So the student curators come up with a theme, they come up with a title, they come up with the idea for the creation of the art, they go to their fellow students back at school and they explain it to them, and the art is all made by students from Jackson Hole High School.
And what's unique about these exhibits is the next generation of artists are already being exhibited in a national museum, and gives them an opportunity to really see and feel what it's like to be a part of an exhibition. She's exposing people to something, a talent maybe that they don't already know that they have, but she piques that curiosity in people who then take it to a next level. And the thing that's great about her is she always keeps all of her ideas fresh, new. She's always striving to bring something new to the museum, to our constituents, to her students.
We have a program which is very dear to my heart, which I've loved working on for the past 5 years or so, and it's called Bison Cast, designed to make our collection more accessible to people who might never travel here to Jackson, Wyoming. So our educators and some special guests appear in the episodes. We usually start in the museum looking at maybe one work of art or a couple different works of art, and then we're outside examining the landscape, the wildlife, the artist whose work we've been looking at, and it's been really, really fun.
She enjoys being able to bring the outdoors into the museum and vice versa, teaching people about the impact of wildlife, the impact of art on wildlife, and the impact of both of those.
There is so much potential to connect with people, to inspire them, to make them want to not only spend time here, but in other museums as well.
Jane, would you join us?
That was a fabulous introduction. I want to give a shout out to Dean Peterson for his great videography. Thank you, Governor Mark Gordon and the Wyoming Arts Council. I'm immensely honored. I also want to thank my nominator, Steve Siemens, the director of the National Museum of Wildlife Art, and Madison Webb-Stanko, our chief marketing officer. They're both over there somewhere. I'm grateful to have so many of my family, co-workers, and volunteers from the museum here tonight. They're also over there somewhere. I've worked at the museum as an educator. I've worked at the museum as an educator for 34 years now. What's that like, you might wonder. I love it, but it can be daunting and complicated. I'll explain. As an educator who works with young children, discussing nude art can be particularly challenging. Nudes, you might say, in a wildlife art museum? Aren't all animals essentially nude? Well, yes, I'm talking about nudes of people. There aren't very many, they're rare, but we do have some. We have a painting by Joseph Stella, the famous modernist. His work reflects an exciting new direction in art that happened during the early 20th century. His work is important, and it always elicits giggles and questions from young children. It's called Leda and the Swan. This large painting, 42 by 47 inches, shows a reclining female nude with a brazen swan. Their forms fill the picture space. The woman's eyes are closed. The swan leans over her body from above, his chest and belly close, but not quite touching hers. He stretches out his long neck to lightly touch his beak to her lips. I can see you have questions. So do the kids on my tours. I attempt to educate with a story. Stories give context. I say something like this: this painting is inspired by a Greek myth. Can anyone tell us what a myth is? The woman is Leda, the queen of Sparta. The swan is actually a god named Zeus. Zeus has magically changed himself into a swan to try to win her over. Trick her. Later, she births multiple children. One of them becomes Helen of Troy. For some reason, the kids never seem very interested in this story. Invariably, they come right back to their original question: but why is she naked? How do I even begin? The kids have viewed this painting for 30 seconds, and I've been contemplating it for over 12 years since we acquired it. They don't know this myth has been depicted by Michelangelo, Da Vinci, and Cézanne. They can't know that hundreds of paintings and sculptures and poems exist that all attempt to interpret this puzzling, perplexing story in multiple ways. They can't begin to understand the multiple layers of meaning, nor the way that it delves into humanity's complex relationship with animals and with the gods. Why is she naked? I do my best. Great question. I love how art makes us think and imagine possibilities. I wish we had more time. In all seriousness, we have a tremendous collection of art, including this piece. I hope the museum will continue to interest, inspire, and challenge art lovers for generations to come. Thank you from the bottom of my heart to the top of my gratitude list.
You brought it, right?
So our next artist comes from close to my heart and close to my home, from Sheridan, and also from Maine, where my mother was born. So can we run the next?
I think there's so much more to Wyoming and Wyoming arts than the Tetons and the cowboy hats. I'm not drawn to the obvious beauty of Yellowstone. I'm drawn to the subtler, quiet things.
Tim Lawson is one of the great artists of our nation, and we're so fortunate to be not only living in the same time period, but to be living in the area where he's from and he's still so connected to.
I was born and raised in Wyoming, so Wyoming is part of who I am. Whether you're going to play, a football game in Cheyenne or a swim meet in Green River, you had to get through 250 to 300 miles of nothing, or seemingly nothing. Now, that part of Wyoming, that middle part, is the part of Wyoming that I'm most drawn to.
He can find art no matter where he is, no matter what he's looking at, and he just, again, puts his soul into it.
Tim did this wonderful series called Hometown. In everybody's hometown, there's a house like he has represented, or a gas station. Nothing was rosy or sunny. It was just very real. And again, it's very universal and connects to audiences, I'd say, also around the world.
One of the highest compliments that I can get is somebody will see a painting of mine of sagebrush or a rocky sandstone cliff, and they say, you know, I was out on the 3T road and I saw this cliff and it made me think of your painting. As you mature as an artist and once you've kind of acquired the basic skills, then you spend much more time trying to paint what you feel. And that's where it gets difficult.
You really get the sense of that curiosity he has through his work. You know, there was that one piece he did featuring the cow.
He found the bones of a cow in the land. He got permission from the owner of the land to take those bones. He connected them all back together to form a skeleton. And I think he did want to see the exact skeletal to feel the muscles of the bone. You just look at that across the room and you just know that's a real cow.
Even though it was a black Angus, when I went to draw and started to draw, what we think is black is every color but black. They have these beautiful, warm sepia tones where depending on how the hair falls and in the creases you get this warmth, and then on the backs they get this beautiful cool reflection, and it can be almost blue.
Without the whole skeleton and the background of what he went into, it probably wouldn't look as good as it does.
He was always seeking how to become more nuanced, more sophisticated, more precise.
We seem to be losing our ability as human beings to see and think subtly. We seem to be moving toward black and white labels. You're this or you're that. I am drawn more and more toward the subtleties.
I think you'd be surprised at how kind and humble Tim is. He doesn't talk about his own work. He shares what's good about other people's work.
There's definitely work that I'm proud of that I've done, but when I look at my own work, I see where I've fallen short from that initial inspiration and that the image that I have, the picture I have in my head. You can never learn it all.
Tim.
Thank you, Wyoming Arts Council, for acknowledging the work that I have been lucky enough to do for 48 years. Also, many thanks goes to the UCross Foundation, Caitlin Adelsberger, and as well as Sue Simpson Gallagher and Gary and Susan Miller for their initiative of putting me before the committee. And thank you, Governor Gordon, for bestowing me with this award. It means a great deal to me. I'd also like to say that I'm very excited that Ann Simpson is able to be here with us tonight. And is one of my most steadfast and enduring supporters, and I'm very grateful for that. But Ann also found my wife for me, and for that I'm really grateful. I'm honored tonight to have much of my family here. My mother and her husband Dave Schreibeis, my sister Lori, and my brother Mike are here. Our son Nathaniel is here, and he is representing our other children who could not be here tonight. And my wife Dory is here. her enthusiasm, her moral compass, her uncanny sense of what is important and what is right gives me a clear enough head to try to do what I do. I am a native of Wyoming. I was not only born, but raised in this Rocky Mountain frontier state. Wyoming is part of me, and I am part of Wyoming. My love of traveling is these long distances on back roads, much to the chagrin of my family, I believe comes from those seemingly endless bus rides I took as a young competitive swimmer, and later as a varsity football, swimming, and triathlon athlete. And as I mentioned in the movie, I hadn't seen that clip, but as a child and later, I thought, like probably many of you do, that those great seemingly empty spaces that comprise much of our state was what you had to get through to get to where you're going. Now, at this point in my life, at this point in my artistic career, those vast vacant spaces are what draws me back to Wyoming. For those spaces are not empty. There is a quiet, beautiful power to be discovered if you slow down, if we take time, if we explore and really look, really, really look. It's in these expansive spaces, the seas of sagebrush, the endless plains of greasewood, where I find much of my inspiration today. I hope it stays just as it is forever. I'm also a product of the Wyoming public school system, as is my mother, my sister, my brother, as are several of our children. 3 generations of public school students right there in Sheridan. In fact, if it were not for one person, one teacher, one junior high art teacher, Miss Nancy Buning, I would not be standing here tonight, nor would I have anything to do with being an artist. I was raised in a family where arts were not part of my upbringing. For much of my youth, my mother worked mostly as a secretary. My father was consumed with owning a pizza restaurant. It is true, I enjoyed drawing as a young child, but I had no guidance, limited encouragement, and no knowledge of any kind of what it took or would take to become an artist. One person, one public school teacher, Miss Buning, changed the course of my entire life as she exposed me to the wonders and possibilities of an artistic life. It has not been easy, nor should it be. Instead of stripping away from our public schools, we as a state, as a country, as citizens, should be investing more into our public education. We should pay and value our teachers much, much, much more than we do. They have the ability to enlighten and develop young minds. What more could one ask for? I fear tremendously if we allow legislation to gut our public school systems, we will be greatly missing something. So here we are, in the state capital of Cheyenne, where I felt compelled to ask those of you who govern and legislate, I'm asking, please, for those of us who are born and raised in this beautiful, wonderful state, don't turn Wyoming into something we won't recognize. Thank you.
You know, it's always a little bit awkward when you have a good friend start calling you Governor Gordon and then lecture you. But Tim, thank you. Thank you. Over on the other side of the state, there's a little bit different, but it's still Wyoming. There are, you know, I think we all know the crotchety old guy and that fabulous wife he has, because that's me. And, but in this case, I have to say, Sue Sommers, you are remarkable. And I remember on the campaign trail, the guy we're going to see up here with you in just a little bit called me once and said, you know, your sign's blown over. Okay, thanks. But this is a good friend too, and two people who care deeply about Wyoming and deeply about our arts. Let's roll this last.
Sue and I go to Italy, and we go to visit Michelangelo's The David. And we had a tour guide there, and he talked about David being the small citizen fighting the giant. And so it's the common man fighting the powerful. And you could see in that piece of art how it could inspire a group of citizens to be more powerful, to believe in themselves. I see art differently in that it does have power, and we should listen to that because it is representative of the people.
They both have contributed so much in their own ways to the arts in Wyoming. Albert as a legislator and Sue as an artist.
She's done books, she's done print, she's done paintings, she's done sculpture.
She was the chair of the board at the University of Wyoming Art Museum.
One reason why I love advocating for the UW Art Museum, they bring art from not just all over the country, but from all over the world, and present it to us to enjoy and to be educated by.
Sue was instrumental in forming Pipeline, pumping art from the great state of Wyoming. Visual artists around the state actively talk about their artwork, post their images, share news about their successes, support each other.
I love to be able to admit that even as an artist, I have a lot to learn from other artists' work. The arts and humanities are what make us human.
During his entire legislative career, Albert supported increased funding for the Arts Council. In fact, he was instrumental in ensuring that the Wyoming Cultural Trust Fund achieved its goal. It's funded the restoration of old theaters, historic buildings.
This money gets turned back around and improves and helps both business and life.
Another legislator basically said that Albert made sure that the arts got the attention that they needed always in Joint Appropriations Committee, and that he used to like to vote no on something just to get Albert riled up. So
each of us is represented in the state capitol by a representative in the House and a senator in the Senate. And they expect you to contact them and tell them what you think is important.
Yeah.
So, you know, when you're loving arts programming in your community, let them know.
Albert and Sue.
So Sue and I are going to tag team this. And first of all, we're both very, very humbled that we would get this award. And I would like to thank the governor for giving this award. I'd like to thank the Wyoming Arts Council for all they do for the arts and for presenting this award. I want to thank Susan Moldenauer and Wendy Bredehoff for nominating us. And here. And for all of those that wrote letters on our behalf. I've had the great honor to serve Sublette County in Wyoming, and which provided me the opportunity to support the arts, and I feel it was a privilege. And one thing I learned in the legislature is you do not want to follow somebody that knows more than you at the mic. And so without further ado, I turn it over to Sue Sommers.
What a setup. Well, I'd like to thank Governor Gordon for honoring our partnership, a hybrid effort between two people who grew up in contrasting landscapes and lifestyles, politics and faiths, but who still found each other. In fact, I believe our efforts to protect and support the arts stem largely from our ability to work together while being very different from each other. This is also what makes art and the enjoyment of the arts so invigorating when unlikely elements join up. Many of you know firsthand that the creative process, at its best, allows artists of all sorts to handle their materials with evolving understanding and to connect with and communicate new and sometimes difficult ideas and experiences. Art makers create new connections for themselves, but also for those who interact with their work. Participants who discover new forms of beauty, new narratives, and new mirrors where we see ourselves differently. But we don't actually like differentness. As human beings, our most basic selves crave routine and uniformity. We would really like everyone to be pretty much just like us. It's so much easier, and it helps us feel safe. But creativity is not safety. Creative success requires taking chances and being open to the unfamiliar, open to failure and even ridicule. And in fact, the flexibility and unlikely connections I'm talking about have been and continue to be essential not only for artistic success, but for innovation of all kinds, in business and the sciences, for mental and physical health, for our success as a species. Let's secure the continuing success of Wyoming, its artists and communities, by courageously fostering diversity.
Well, how about these artists tonight, huh? One more. Big round of applause. My name is Sarah Sheen. I'm the Deputy Director for State Parks and Cultural Resources, and we are winding this show down. So I want to thank everyone for coming tonight to help us celebrate the arts. I think we did that in a really big way tonight. Thank you for joining us to recognize those who continue to work hard across the state to support a thriving and a vibrant arts and culture ecosystem in Wyoming. One final big thank you to the Wyoming Arts Council staff. Thank you to all of our evening sponsors who this event would not be possible without, as was stated earlier, No state dollars pay for this. This is all donor. That's really important, and I very much appreciate it. It's been that way for a long time, and we'll keep that going. I want to thank the Arts Council Board for selecting the artists that we celebrated tonight. Thank you to the Little America staff for providing us with a nice evening. And of course, thank you, Governor Gordon, for your continued support of the arts in the great state of Wyoming. Thank you again, everyone, for joining us tonight, and have a wonderful evening.